2020 was really the year for covers in music. I mean, when you're stuck at home and you're a musician who's bored out of their mind and don't want to necessarily make a new album yet because maybe you just released one, then you're going to want to do something, and that could include cover songs. And like I said, there was a lot that came out. I have 9 in particular here, as I separated them into 3 categories: the bad covers, the meh covers, and the good covers. Basically, I'm just going to go through each of those lists and tell you the 3 songs that are on them and why they are where they are, because for a cover to really make me impressed, it has to still have the same atmosphere of the old song while also feeling different and, you know, from the original in itself. It can't be like trying to be a carbon copy of that song, if you get my drift. But there's a couple rules that we're going to go by here. First rule, had to have been done studio-wise, no live. Like, this couldn't have been like some sort of acoustic performance and it was done for that live purpose and not recorded. Overall, that's off limits. And bands, especially on YouTube, who are known for cover songs like First to 11 or Halocene, they're not eligible for this list because they're mainly known for covers. Even though they do have their own material, people still come to their YouTube channel for the covers. So I think the only way to start this off is to start with the 3 worst covers that came out in 2020. It's embarrassing because 2 of these covers made my worst songs of the year list, mainly because it was just like, what the hell? Actually, all 3 of these are really just what the hell. The first one we have is 3 Days Grace, somebody that I used to know, the Gautier cover. It kind of came out of left field. I actually first heard this on the radio, and at first I was like, is this 3 Days Grace? Because it kind of sounds like their new, I say new lead singer's like 5 years in, but you get what I mean. This kind of sounds like the lead singer they have now, and it just seemed very current 3 Days Gracious. And wouldn't you know it, after the song was over, they were like, that was 3 Days Grace with somebody that I used to know. And I said, these motherfuckers did not just cover Gautier and do it horribly. Don't get me wrong, I think the one thing they did was they actually made it their own. It's definitely different from the original song. But one of the things that made the original song so great was that it had a callback. It had 2 different perspectives, the male and female perspective of this broken relationship. Here we don't get that, and it kind of just stops the song's meaning overall. Like, the song doesn't have any meaning after that. It's just kind of seemed forced. I don't know whether by them or the record label, but this was not a good attempt at a great song. Next, we have Machine Gun Kelly with Travis Barker covering Paramore's Misery Business. I knew that this was going to be bad news from the start when I saw that MGK was covering Paramore. Because you're talking about MGK, who's more known for the rap. He just started doing that pop-punk thing this year. It was really shitty. His ego's gone up because I saved pop-punk. No, you didn't, buddy. You didn't even come close to saving that or saving rock music. But, you know, it is what it is. People will argue with me about that, but he didn't. He thought, okay, well, recruiting Travis Barker might make things a little bit better. And again, it didn't. Granted, Travis Barker did his part, but Machine Gun Kelly is no Hayley Williams. Let me just get that out of the way. That was like the worst this could have been vocal-wise. I mean, you know me. I don't necessarily think that Misery Business is one of Paramore's best songs. I'm a fan of them. I'm a fan of the song. But when you listen to all their albums in the discography, like I have, like, all the time, then you will realize that Misery Business is not the best thing they've done, but to hear it get so shit on like this from someone who was never talented in the first place just really breaks my heart that a song from my childhood that everybody was singing, even if they didn't like rock music, this was like the pop-punk song at the time, you know, no more Blink-182, they're broken up. Green Day's been kind of quiet for a couple of years, and then he had these bands like Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco everywhere, but this was the one that brought Paramore to stardom, and now you're just making it look bad. Granted, I will say, maybe when people are done listening to this version, you help pop-punk by making people go back and listen to the original version because they like that better, but in the end, you somehow made the song worse. I didn't think it could be possible, but you made the song 100 times worse than it was. Then we have Korn with The Devil Went Down to Georgia. Korn's never really been good with covers. I do like their Word Up cover, but for the most part, I mean, they just don't know how to do them correctly. This was one of them. They made this after Charlie Daniels passed away, and I get it. All the, money made from this goes to the Charlie Daniels Foundation's proceeds. I get it. It's a good cause. But again, that doesn't make it a good cover. Jonathan Davis, who's known for his scatting, you'd think he'd be able to pull off the talk singing like Charlie Daniels does, and that's just far from the case here. The instrumentation's off. Oh, and rapper Yelawolf is on this because why not, I guess, and it just doesn't do anything to soothe the ears. It's just a utter disappointment. Thank God they did that Alice in Chains cover later in the year because that was actually pretty good, but this will haunt Korn in 2020 because this is what people are going to remember. This shit fest of a cover. Now we're moving on to the 3 OK covers that came out this year. And the first one is actually the artist that probably talked the most about this year, and that's Poppy with her cover of Tattoos, All the Things She Said. Now, again, I know this was for like a good cause. This came out during Pride Month, this, that, and the other, and this is a very pro-LGBT song, but Poppy had the sin of not necessarily separating it from the original, as, yes, I can tell the difference between Poppy's and Tattoos version, but if you're not a fan of either or hearing the song for the first time, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell the difference, and she just doesn't really make it her own. It's just kind of like, what can we take from the original version and add to ours? And again, just little to nothing. She still did a good job. I still think the cover's okay, but again, I just felt like it could have been done better for someone who just came off this album of, anger and finally finding themselves, and this was the best you had to offer for this cover that we all got excited for. It's like, C- at best.
Somebody told me you had a boyfriend who looked like a girlfriend, but I hadn't thought you.
Then we have Motionless in White. Somebody told me. This one shocked the hell out of me. I'm not the biggest Motionless in White fan. Heck, I wouldn't even really say that I enjoy them at all. But when I saw this cover was out, I was like, oh, I gotta listen to this. And again, mixed feelings. I mean, they didn't obviously try to make it sound like the original version from The Killers, but Chris Motionless's vocals didn't really fit this song all that well. It wasn't necessarily a horrible performance, but again, how am I really supposed to react to this other than just like, oh, okay, that happened. It didn't fascinate me, but it's just kind of, it's there, and that's really all this cover was. It was just there. It was in my way, but it got out of the way as soon as it was over, so I guess that's why it's okay and not bad, because it didn't burn my ears all year like the 3 Days Grace cover, but it definitely shouldn't be here. And the last in the OK track, we have the We Will Rock You cover by In This Moment featuring Lizzie Hale of Hailstorm and Taylor Momsen of The Pretty Reckless. I mean, other than adding the extra verses, I found it decent enough. Like, We Will Rock You is actually, to be honest, probably one of the easier songs to cover because it's so short. It's got simple guitar riffs, and of course you got that boom boom clap beat going on with the drums. It's one of the easier ones to cover, so it's like, okay, yeah, they did that, and they tried to make this like a female power anthem, which is fine, no problem with that, but in the end, I found it not that intimidating. It was just kind of like, okay, it's there, and that's about it. And now we have the 3 really good tracks. Now this first one might surprise you, but remember when I said that Korn covered Devil Down to Georgia and they did it terribly? Well, what if I told you that another band that gets hate on all the time covered it and did a lot better? I'm talking about Nickelback covering Charlie Daniels' The Devil Went Down to Georgia. This is so much better than Korn's version, and I'm not even that big of a Nickelback fan. I like Korn more than Nickelback, so I really came into this one having little to no expectation. But Chad Kroeger, his, talking vocals aren't overdoing it, and the instrumentation work is 100 times better. Like, this is what people say or think when they say that Nickelback has talent, because they do. They have talent within the band when they're not trying to write some boring, bland rock song that sounds the same over and over and over again. The guitar work is fantastic. Like, why can't Nickelback do more of this? I'm not saying cover songs. I'm just saying, why can't Nickelback have more, like, higher intensity songs like this on every album instead of worrying about radio play, this, that, and the other? It makes them so much better, and the fact that this cover just did so much better. Granted, I don't really think they ever planned on releasing this. Apparently they had this in their vault for a couple of years, but after Charlie Daniels passed, as like a little memorial thing for him, they said, this is the perfect time to do it. And it really just, I was sitting there like mind blown, like, wow, they really just outdid Korn. This came out a couple weeks after Korn's version did, and it just, I was like, thank God someone did this song justice after Korn just shit all over it. Thank God. Then we have Evanescence with The Chain. This is the Fleetwood Mac cover. This one was on a video game soundtrack. I can't remember the video game, but this was like Evanescence's first new material since 2017 when Synthesis came out, and this was around the time when they announced that they were working on that new album that is now coming out in March of 2021, and this is not going to be on the album, but it was just soothing to see that they were still a thing and that this new album was going to come to fruition, and this was kind of like the holdover, the placement. Now, people still haven't given me the worst Amy Lee vocal performance ever, and I wouldn't call this the worst, but I definitely wouldn't call this like one of her top tier performances. It's still good, but there are plenty of other songs that I would rank her voice being good over this, but the band does really good instrumental-wise, and even Amy Lee's vocals are still good enough, and when Amy Lee is still at 50%, it's just still fantastic. That's just the way it is. The only way that she is ever going to have a terrible vocal performance is if she's less than 50%, and to me, she still gets passable, vocals on that one in this cover, although kind of forgotten by some. It's still a nice one from 2020 that came out early, really. I think this was before, this was before quarantine. I think this was January, and go listen to it if you haven't. It's really good. And this last one is by YouTube metal god and former metalcore god, Jared Dines and Danny Worsnop. Weird collab. Not necessarily that weird, but I guess kind of unexpected. When I saw the cover that they were doing, though, I kind of knew it was going to work from the start. They covered Aerosmith's Don't Want to Miss a Thing, and I gotta say, knowing Danny Worsnop's vocal talent outside of just screaming and growling here and there, he can really, really pull a song like this off, and he did a great job. Jared Dines did his thing on the guitar, he did the solo well. It was perfect, it really was. Like, I'm sitting there listening to it, like, again, they did the song justice, and this was a song that over the years I had fallen out of love with because it just got played over and over and over again, and I felt like you couldn't escape it. But Jared Dines and Danny Worsnop really gave this song a new life for me. It made me appreciate it more, that, this song just has this vulnerability, and even though it kind of sounded similar to the original, you can still definitely tell the difference, because, Danny Worsnop's no Steven Tyler, but in the end, he still has the better vocal chops to pull it off. This wasn't like MGK trying to do Misery Business where it didn't work. This worked fine, and it turned out to be one of my favorite, if not my favorite, covers to come out in 2020 overall. So yeah, those were 9 covers that came out in 2020, ranking them from worst to best, basically. You guys can tell me in the comments below what are some covers that came out this year that you maybe loved or hated. They can even be ones that I mentioned, and we could disagree on them too. That'd be interesting to hear your take on these ones if you've heard them already. But yeah, until then, stay safe out there, wear your mask, and I will catch you all in the next one.